Hello and welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we have a returning guest with some compelling updates to share with us all. His name is Oliver Linch. He's the CEO of Bittrex Global, and he joins us today to unravel the complexities surrounding cryptocurrency regulations, specifically the implications of their recent settlement with the SEC. As you may recall, Oliver was previously on the show discussing various aspects of the crypto world, from central bank currencies to the regulatory environment. But today we're going to try and get a nuanced understanding of the details of that SEC charge against Bittrex Global and learn how Bittrex Global reached a settlement, what Oliver thinks this outcome signifies for the broader crypto ecosystem, and the future direction post-settlement, including regulatory compliance and potential growth opportunities. But enough for me. Buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to the UK, where Oliver Linch is waiting to join us on the show again. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. I think it's been about 6 months since we last spoke, but for anyone missed our previous conversation, can you just remind everyone listening with a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be back here again. We were talking pre-show about whether it's 6 months, and I said it feels about 5 minutes. So in crypto terms, that's about right. My name is Oliver Linch, and I'm CEO of Bittrex Global, which is the world's premier regulated digital assets exchange.
Well, the last time we spoke, I think it was in April, we were talking about the rise of CBDCs. There's been a lot of talk about them since. Some good, some not so good. Some people are concerned about it. But I'm curious, you're right in the eye of the storm here. How have things evolved since we last spoke on everything CBDCs?
Well, look, I think the main message that we came to, or the main conclusion we came to, is that confusion abounds on CBDCs, that no one really knows what they are, what they're for, what they're doing, how they work. And since then, there's been an awful lot of chat, but not an awful lot of clarity, unfortunately or fortunately. I think there's still an existential question which needs to be asked, which is, what is the point of them? What is the problem that they're trying to solve? And I think I said last time, they seem to me to be a solution in need of a problem, and no one has yet been able to identify, I think, to anyone's real satisfaction, what the point of a CBDC is, let alone how it's going to work and begin to answer the privacy questions that people have about them. So, I remain hopeful. I think there is something of interest there. I think there is, I think the crypto industry as a whole does best when it works in conjunction with traditional finance. And so to the extent that a CBDC is an attempt to find some kind of hybrid solution, which takes the best of blockchain technology and crypto and the best of traditional finance and government control, then great, bring it on, make that work. At the moment, I fear it is still the case that they somehow seem to have attracted the worst from both sides. And I'm not sure that anyone really is convinced by the proposition, or I should say propositions plural, because there's so many iterations out there that really it's just a mess.
And as you know, we always try to demystify some of those sensationalist headlines we might see clogging up our news feeds, especially around crypto. And I suppose a good place to start this time around would be that recent settlement Bittrex Global reached with SEC. So can you give me a bit of an overview of the changes that were initially filed and what led to the decision to settle there?
Sure, absolutely. And I think, the context here is the regulatory uncertainty that exists in the US.
Yeah.
And I think, your listeners will know our position, my position, which is that having clear, unambiguous rules that allow you to play the game is essential in any context, right? Not just in crypto. Yeah. My background is as a lawyer. I spent over a decade as a financial services regulatory advisory lawyer, advising banks, broker-dealers, traditional exchanges, clearinghouses, the whole range of financial institutions. And I was able to do that because over decades, they've built up pretty clear rules, and they change all the time, and it's dynamic and it's exciting, or at least as exciting as a lawyer's life gets. But the point there is people know the game they're playing. And I think in the US, it was and is still the case that even those of us that want to do the right thing, right, and there are a lot more people than we often get credit for, simply don't know what it is what we're doing. Now, Bittrex Global exists and has always existed for the purposes of serving non-US customers. We never offered our services into the US. We never allowed and will never allow any US persons to become clients of Bittrex Global platform. I used to therefore come on podcasts like this and say, one of the joys of being CEO of Bittrex Global is that I don't need to worry about the regulatory uncertainty in the US or what the SEC is thinking. But some people took a different view of that, and one of those people was the SEC. And so I think the reason that we settled, and the terms of the settlement are public, and it's very clear to everyone that we did so on a neither admit nor deny basis. What we agreed to do, and it was really important to us to do it, is just draw a line under the whole issue and then get on with the business of actually running the Bittrex Global Exchange for the benefit of the Bittrex Global customers. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to do. And so the settlement just says, look, we draw a line under this, we move on. And can get back to that situation where I can focus on the fact that the Bittrex Global is regulated in two of the most prominent jurisdictions for crypto regulation. And they're prominent because they're really robust. They're prominent because they were amongst the first in the world to set out a framework for what crypto regulation can look like, and have served as a model, but for other jurisdictions since. And they're still out there leading. They're in Liechtenstein and in Bermuda. And if you ask anyone to name jurisdictions that can really show how to set up a robust, meaningful, but carefully tailored regulatory framework, Liechtenstein and Bermuda will be top of that list. My focus and our focus at Bittrex Global is on ensuring that we comply with those really quite burdensome regulatory obligations. And so we were very pleased to be able to draw a conclusion to the SEC issue and get back to what really matters to us and to our customers.
So I guess then post-settlement, how does this experience inform your business operations and compliance measures moving forward? And especially for anybody listening, what immediate changes should your users expect?
Well, the answer is none. I mean, the answer is it's back to business as usual for us. As I say, we have always and will always only have non-US customers. We've never offered and will never seek to offer our services into the US. And so if you are a customer of ours listening from France or from Australia or from Japan or from, wherever it might be, you shouldn't notice any difference at all, because we're now able to just go back to servicing you as our customers as we always have.
And in your view, I'm curious, how does this settlement set maybe a precedent for the crypto industry as a whole? Do you think it could potentially act as almost a catalyst for a more stringent regulation, or perhaps even pave the way for more clarity? It's kind of what's needed, isn't it?
Well, clarity is certainly what's needed. But, as a lawyer, I look to settlements and I'm reminded of a few legal maxims. But the key one is that regulation by enforcement is, generally speaking, a very bad idea. If you want regulatory clarity, get regulatory clarity. And the way to do that is through the proper legislative process. In the US, that involves a combination of various institutions. Congress have a role. The regulators have a role. It's a very complex structure. But there's no shying away from engaging with that properly. And it's not legitimate to, albeit through frustration, rely on proxies for engaging in those discussions, because you're never going to get the regulatory certainty that you actually need to operate if you're doing it piecemeal, if you're doing it on the basis of enforcement, and if you're doing it in a way that is not, creating a proper legal framework. These things are difficult. Having a proper regulatory framework for crypto is difficult. It is not straightforward. It requires a lot of thought. It requires, an analysis of civil law questions, contract law questions, property law questions. There's a reason that those jurisdictions that have led the way have expended a lot of time and effort and money into getting it right. And I think shying away from that, I understand why people in the US hope that this might serve as a proxy for it, but it's a cop-out. It's a pure cop-out, and it doesn't work. And hard cases make for bad law. And I think in this case, people need clarity, and there's a proper way of getting that, and there's an improper way of getting that. And what we need is the proper way of getting that clarity that is so desperately needed in the US and around the world. This is not just a US problem. There are still other jurisdictions around the world where they don't have proper regulatory frameworks. Thankfully, global standard setters such as IOSCO or the G20 are now turning their sights to actually setting up minimum standards that will apply hopefully around the world. But we're getting there too slowly. The EU has made good progress. They've adopted MiCA. MiCA is based, by the way, in some cases explicitly on the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act. So when I say leading the way, I really do mean leading the way. But that doesn't come into effect for another, 13, 14 months. There's a lot of time in between that. The UK sending out mixed messages earlier this year. They consulted on a proper regulatory framework for crypto, but then last month, or so earlier this month, introduced rules that cut across that desire to be seen as a global hub for crypto, in introducing their new financial promotion rules in a way that I think a lot of people found quite difficult to understand, the way in which they were brought in and the way in which those rules work in the absence of a proper regulatory framework. So, it's easy to point at the US and say, you need to get your house in order. And that's certainly true if the industry is to thrive. But there are other jurisdictions too that really need to understand not just the need for the kind of regulation, but actually the opportunities that it brings. And it's always, doom and gloomers say, all this stuff needs to be regulated because it's dangerous. Actually, I say, no, this stuff needs to be regulated because it's exciting. This stuff needs to be regulated because people want to be part of it. And it's therefore incumbent upon governments and regulators and policymakers to create a mechanism whereby people can actually engage in crypto, get the advantages from it that they want, but do so in a way that is recognizable and safe, and regulated and respected, and learning all of those lessons that we spent decades learning in the traditional finance sphere. So the regulation is not there because it's a bad thing. The regulation is there to protect people, to allow them access to this new, exciting, innovative product and service that people around the world really want access to.
I think I should also highlight that when you're talking about adopting MiCA, we're talking about markets in crypto assets regulation, not the singer-songwriter, right?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what he would have to say about it, but the markets in crypto assets regulation. I think what's exciting about that is not quite as catchy as Grace Kelly as a song, but what's exciting about it is it's for the first time a significant legal jurisdiction, the EU, really getting to grips with crypto and saying, well, look, this is not something that small jurisdictions can do, but big jurisdictions can't. And that's the accusation often leveled. Okay, but it's fine for Liechtenstein or for Bermuda, but it doesn't work if you're talking about populations of hundreds of millions of people. And the EU adopting MiCA after a lot of struggle just shows that that's not true, right? The EU, nobody's ever accused the EU of being nimble or being quick, but even they have managed it. So, but we're not asking really at this stage for the wheel to be reinvented. We know what proper regulation looks like. We know the principles that need to underpin it. We know how it will work. There are various models that can be looked to, but the fact that the EU has managed to get there by adopting these measures, albeit they haven't yet come into effect, I think is a really positive development, and it really shows a path forward for our industry. So, not quite. He's French, isn't he, MiCA, the singer? I think. So not quite French pop stars, but perhaps a little bit of French legality in there instead.
Yeah, and I think I've just unwittingly given myself MiCA earworm for the rest of the day. Shame on me. But I'm not sure how much of this you are able to talk about when we talk about legal challenges, etc. But is there anything you can share around some of the difficulties you've faced throughout that regulatory period? Were there any specific challenges that you think are unique to blockchain companies?
Well, I think there are challenges that are unique to blockchain companies because of this lack of certainty. And I think people forget the principles that we're talking about here are the same principles that we've built up over decades and decades in traditional finance. And we're impatient, and I'm impatient, and we demand action now. But what we're really talking about is recreating decades of learnings in a matter of months or years for crypto. So, having a bit of patience and a bit of perspective is important. But at the same time, those lessons have been learned, and those lessons ought to be carried across. And the protections that we put in place, for example, for retail customers, whatever it is, right? Whatever your preferred customer protection or consumer protection of choice is, those don't go away just because you put the word crypto in front of it, right? It's not like the Batmobile. It doesn't fundamentally change the nature of what's going on here. And so, we need to carry across those lessons because institutions want to carry across those lessons. Right? And this is a really important point because the lesson of this current bear market and probably the way out of this current bear market is through the institutions. When I speak to our customers and colleagues from big banks, brokers, funds, what they want to do is use all of their experience, their models, their trading strategies learned from traditional finance and apply them in the crypto sphere. But they can only do that if the rules are recognizably the same. They'll only be allowed to do that in accordance with their rules if the protections are recognizably the same. So actually, in order to capture that huge potential market, we need to create a system where they can compare like for like, and they can say, well, look, we could either invest in, stocks and shares on a traditional exchange, or we can invest in, Bitcoin on a crypto exchange. Here's the comparison. Here's how it works. And by the way, these are equivalent in terms of mechanism, in terms of protection, in terms of the rules, in terms of the transparency, so that that's a fair like for like comparison. So actually, it's in crypto's interests to learn those lessons really quickly, to apply those lessons really quickly, because without them, institutions can't. They won't be allowed to actually make the investments that we know they want to do and are starting to do and are gearing up to do.
And talking about reputation management as well, I think regulatory action can often impact a company's reputation when it's being plastered across the headlines on an almost daily basis. I'm curious, I know things are okay now, but looking back, how has Bittrex Global planned to regain or maintain the trust of its users and investors post-settlement? Because I'd imagine you've been on a bit of a journey.
Yeah, look, it's not something I would highly recommend to anyone who's engaging with enforcement action against any regulator. Yeah. But I think actually what it allowed us to do is really hone our message and demonstrate that we take compliance, we take our legal obligations incredibly seriously. And the fact that we were able to settle this matter, neither admit nor deny what was going on and what the allegations were and move on and draw a line under it so very quickly, I think actually for a lot of our customers was really seen as an indication of those principles and how they play out in practice. So the regulatory uncertainty is a question, is an issue, but people I think know that Bittrex Global stands for the principles of being secure, innovative, and regulated. And actually our commitments to maintaining our regulatory status in Liechtenstein and in Bermuda really underpins the trust that people have in that brand. And they know what they're getting. Bittrex is a brand that's been around now for over a decade. And that means something in an industry that is often chastised for being transient and for being short-termist. Bittrex Global takes a very long-term view of the industry here. We know what is needed. We know what people want from us. We engage deeply with our customers, and we eschew a lot of the headline grabbing, flashing neon lights kind of stuff, and really focus on providing customers with what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they want. And a really good example of that is the UK, as I mentioned, 10 days ago introduced these new financial promotions rules, which, although they've brought problems and the way they were introduced was problematic, actually really highlighted to a lot of people just how outlandish quite a lot of crypto advertising was, and to some extent still is. But when we came to review our compliance with those rules, actually, we had to make quite a lot of changes in terms of complying with the precise way those rules are set up. But the overriding message is, well, we've never made big, bold, flashy, outlandish statements about crypto because we've never seen crypto in that light. What we see crypto as is part of the wider financial services industry. Part of it, it's just 5-10 years from now, whatever it is, there's not going to be. I'm not going to say there's not going to be a need for your podcast, but maybe there isn't, right? Because maybe it's going to be just another aspect of finance. You'll have the product guys, you have the debt guys, you'll have the bond guys, you'll have the equity guys, you'll have the crypto guys. It just trips up the tongue as crypto sort of takes its place at the adults table. And I think that's really important, and that's a real clear vision for the future of crypto that we're trying to build.
And with your recent experience in mind and that journey that you've been on, is there any advice that you'd offer to maybe a founder of a crypto company listening who's thinking of navigating that horrendous, complex regulatory environment in the US right now and looking for a few tips or best ways around it? Any big takeaways from that whole experience?
Well, I think people are rightly incredibly skeptical of the US right now and incredibly cautious. And actually, when I speak to my customers following that settlement, the message that they say is, well, they now know they can engage with Bittrex Global safe in the knowledge that we are outside of the US perimeter, and that we do not allow US customers, we do not offer our service into the US. And actually, they can engage with us because of that. Now, that sounds great if you're me, and that sounds great if you're one of these people that thinks you can just pull down the shutters around the US and pretend it doesn't exist. But I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think that's good for the industry as a whole. And I think, frankly, it's a naive belief, because the fact is you can't ignore the US. It's too important to the financial services sector. If we're right that crypto is just going to be part of the wider financial industry, you can't ignore the US. They've got the infrastructure, they've got the talent, they've got the universities, they've got the entrepreneurs. So I think engagement with the US is going to be essential if crypto is really going to realize its potential. That said, Bittrex Global doesn't, right? We exist for the purposes of not serving the US. And I think increasingly you're seeing companies around the world making a similar decision, or at least hedging as to whether they can really get involved in the US. And I think that's really sad. And I think, importantly, the people that are being most failed by it are US citizens themselves. And they're being failed twice. They're being failed the first time because they're not going to be allowed access to the financial services and products that crypto offers people around the world. And we know that people in the US want access to that stuff, just like they do in India or in Japan or in the UK or in wherever it is. But the second way they're being failed is, they're not getting the protections that a proper regulatory framework can offer them. And if you don't create a pathway for good actors to act properly, all you really do is clear the way for bad actors to come in and act badly. So it is a sad state of affairs there. I completely understand why people are skeptical, why people don't want to engage at all. But for the long-term health of our industry as a whole, I don't think you can ignore the US altogether. And I do think we therefore need some kind of movement in establishing rules for engagement in the US.
And for members of your community that have been patiently listening to our conversation today, just hoping to learn a little bit more about the road ahead, can you possibly share any insights about the company's roadmap? Because it's almost illegal not to mention the word roadmap when talking to any crypto company. And how does the settlement affect your short-term and long-term plans, including any potential partnerships, which I know you're probably locked down to NDAs, or new features Is there anything you can share around that future roadmap as we prepare for 2024?
Well, I'd say the settlement doesn't affect our roadmap, and I've used the word now as well, so we're equally guilty. Doesn't affect that at all, because we are and have always been focused on delivering to our clients what they need. But what they need has probably shifted in the last 12 months or so, following some of the scandals last year, and obviously the FTX scandal most significantly. People actually understand that some of the more, how do I say, esoteric or ancillary activities that exchanges are and were engaging in is not really what they want. And what they want is a straightforward, easy to understand, highly regulated spot exchange. And dare I say it, something that is a little bit boring and a little bit less fancy, shiny, whatever your preferred adjective is, but actually allows them to engage in a meaningful way with crypto, have access to tools and products within that context, and that's what our focus is on. And we have announced some partnerships that are really quite exciting. We've announced our partnerships with Copper and their Clearloop custody solution, and that's something that we're really focused on, because we have three founding principles in exchange: innovation, security, and regulation. And that security piece is, I think, becoming very quickly very important to a lot of people, especially on the institutional side. So creating a custody solution that works for the industries is something that we're really focused on at this end, and means a lot, I think, to our customers. Other things, you'll have to watch the space, I'm afraid, before I can give too much away. But you should know that our watchword as a company is focusing on our customers, focusing on those three core principles of security, innovation, and regulation, and really demonstrating that the future of crypto doesn't have to be, silly pictures of apes or rockets flying to the moon, but can actually be a much more grown-up, respectable, and responsible part of the financial services industry. So that's what you can expect from Bittrex Global. I think that's what people do expect from Bittrex Global. That's what they know, and why they trust us. And we're not about to squander that trust, because trust at the moment is in very short supply. So people know what they're going to get from us, and we're very grateful for them coming back to do those kind of trades in the absence of trust across the board, because we have those brand loyalty, but brand loyalty underpinned by an ideological understanding of what the future of crypto needs to look like.
Well, you've left us with a few teasers there. We'll have to get you back on in early 2024, see how things are taking shape. And I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me for the second time in 6 months, for sharing insights and updates on all things Bittrex Global. I guess if there's something we can manifest together, something we can do for you now, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or maybe even listened to this podcast. So if there was one person you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, who would it be and why? And we'll see if we can make something happen.
Well, I think one of the... I'll hold you to whether you can make it happen. I think, I'm British, and one of the things that I look for is, as we were talking about earlier, is whether the UK is really going to be realising the stated political goals of creating a proper crypto hub in the UK. And I think, I would love to sit down, see the Prime Minister as an easy person to really hold their feet to the coals and say, look, are you going to do this, and how do we make it work? So I think that will probably be my answer, because I think there's a real opportunity there. I think there's, when I speak to people around the world that realize that the regulation in the European time zone is necessary, they look out there and they say, well, all there is MiCA in Europe, the regulation, not the singer. So we'll pick our, whatever jurisdiction and go get regulated there. And they're doing it with a sense of reluctance and, oh, well, I suppose that's for the best. And then when the UK in, I think it was February of this year, put out that consultation paper that essentially said, hold your horses, don't pull any triggers just yet, and wait and see what we're going to do. people were excited by that.
Yeah.
And people want to be in the UK if they can, because we've got the infrastructure, we've got the City of London, we've got a lot of things going for it. The common law system being a big advantage and big draw. And so the time is right. There's a possibility here to actually do something and actually create something. But since then, not a lot has happened. They seem to have lost some kind of, I don't know whether it's impetus or drive or direction. And so, maybe it wouldn't be the most comfortable breakfast or the conversation, but I think something to help the UK regain the initiative, regain the pizzazz that it seemed to show earlier this year, and really seize on that opportunity. I think it would be remiss of me not to give that a go.
And Rishi does like to talk math, finance and Bitcoin in just about any conversation with any person. So we'll see what we can do there. We'll throw it out into the universe, see what we can manifest. And anybody wanting to just find out more information about Bittrex Global, anything we discussed today, where do you like to point everyone listening?
Well, you can go to bittrexglobal.com or you can find us on socials at Bittrex Global on Twitter or LinkedIn, except if you're in the UK, because of those new rules where you have to go to at Bittrex Global UK on Twitter and LinkedIn and only look at that one, please, because I'm serious. Right? We take these rules incredibly seriously.
Yeah.
So if you're in the UK, at Bittrex Global UK, the rest of the world at Bittrex Global, and you can find me on at Oliver Linch if for some reason you want to hear more inane ramblings about the importance of law. So you can find me on both Twitter and LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll get links added to all those things. And just love chatting with you today and learning more about behind the headlines, reaching that settlement with the SEC, what you feel the outcome means for the crypto industry, the implications for the firm moving forward, and the positive side. As you said, we hear about that doom and gloom too much, and it's just great to hear a more positive take on the industry. So it'd be great to get you back on early next year, find out a little more. But for now, just a big thank you for joining me today again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to do your show, and I look forward to doing it again next year.
As always, huge thank you to Oliver Linch for sharing his candid insights into what has been a transformative period for Bittrex Global and the broader crypto landscape. I think through today's discussion, we captured the nuances of crypto regulation, the importance of a global standard, and what it means to navigate these often uncharted, murky waters successfully. And as we close, we're reminded that the intersection between technology and regulation is ever evolving. I think there is a critical need for the crypto industry to align itself with traditional financial principles while also innovating responsibly. And the key takeaway that underscores the complexity and the promise that lie ahead in the crypto world. But I've taken up far too much of your time today. So any questions, anything you want to share, if you want to come on the show, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today. So thank you as always for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.